channel. My name is Bobbi Holmes. I am the USA Today Bestselling Author of the Paranormal Cozy Mystery Series, Haunting Danielle. I also write under the pen name Anna J. McIntyre. Today I'm going to discuss 11 embarrassing self-publishing mistakes I've made since I started this journey. Now, obviously I've made more than 11 mistakes along the way, but I thought I'd share these. Now, to be fair, not all of them are embarrassing. There's a couple of them that are just more annoying and more of a problem for me than for anybody else, but I'm going to share all 11 of them, and then that hopefully will help other authors understand, especially beginning authors, that as much as you try, you will make mistakes, but don't let that discourage you. Keep going on. So we'll go on to the very first one that I'm going to mention today. I use Vellum to create my ebooks and my paperback books and my large print, and when I do my hardbacks, I'll use it for those too. I used to do all my formatting manually on Word. It took a lot of time, especially for the different vendors. You had to do a different format for each one, and it really took a lot of time. So Vellum came out, and I really wanted the program, and I fell in love with it, but I did do one really embarrassing, stupid mistake when I used it for the first time. Now, it wasn't Vellum's fault, this was mine. At the time, now I'm not sure how it is now, but when I purchased the program back then, it was only available on Mac computers. I don't know what the status is now. So I was about ready to get a new computer. I had never had a Mac, and so I decided I was going to upgrade because I needed a new computer anyway, and I was going to get a Mac so I could get the Vellum program because I really wanted to use it. I knew it would save me time, which it has. So I got the program, and on my first ebook I put it together, and it was really easy to use, but unfortunately I had some getting used to using a Mac compared to my old PC. And one of it was how everything was so easy to move around files. So basically what I did was when I was proofing and getting ready to send off, I accidentally moved one chapter from one location to another location in the story. And this was a pre-order, and I had like over 3,000 people had already pre-ordered this book. So it went out, and on the day it went out, I happened to go over the file, and it was like, holy crap, I have a chapter that's over, like, in space, chapter 20 when it's down in 35 or whatever it was switched around. And I freaked out, and it was just, oh my gosh, I have really made a huge mistake here. And like I said, this was not Vellum's fault, it was mine because I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, and I accidentally just slipped. So you have to be careful when you're moving files around in there, because you can very easily, change the order of your chapters, which is a scary thing to do. So I immediately emailed everybody on my email list. I blasted it on my Facebook, and I contacted Amazon, and they made a correction within hours. They sent out, what they normally do is they don't really send out a file. They notify the readers that they have an incorrect file, and then they can download one. So it's a kind of it's a hassle for everybody. It's a hassle for me, it's a hassle for my readers, and for the readers that didn't get the correct file or didn't know that there's a correct file out there. And so I, changed that, and I'm waiting for these horrible reviews to come flooding in. Well, strangely enough, I have wonderful, wonderful readers, and now I haven't checked my reviews recently, but the early reviews, I always check reviews when a book first comes out because I want to see how it's doing. And when I checked that book, there was nothing about misplaced chapter. I mean, I had all these really good reviews and nobody said anything. There was one reviewer that made sort of like an inside joke, little comment, inferred about the chapters being switched around, but he didn't really come out and say it. He just kind of made this little, you could tell it was sort of a joke, but he still left me a really good review. So that one could have really destroyed that book sale, and it didn't. Nobody left any horrible blasting reviews on it because of that. And so I have to thank my readers for being gentle with me, and at the same time, it was a lesson learned. So when you are using a program like Vellum, be careful when you're moving your files around, because you can very easily, if you're not paying attention, you're moving too quickly, you can shift a chapter from one place to another in your book, and that is a bad thing. So that was the first one. The next one has to do with selecting the wrong character name. Now, in book 1 of my Haunting Danielle series, the very first book I put out, I named a character Joe Morelli. Now, for the Stephanie Plum fans out there, you'll immediately say, hey, that's from Stephanie Plum. What are you doing? Well, I had heard of this series, obviously, but I hadn't read it. And I was not familiar with her character, Joe Morelli, who happens to be a police officer like my Joe Morelli. But I was naming my character after my son-in-law's first name is Joe, and I had dedicated that book to Joe because I like to tease him about things, and so I had named him Joe. And the last name Morelli, I borrowed some from friends of ours whose last name happens to be Morelli, and I wanted an Italian character, and they're Italian, so I borrowed their last name. So that's how I named him Joe Morelli, unknowing that there's a very well-known character out there in book world named Joe Morelli. So my book goes out, and nobody mentioned anything for the first couple books. And then I started getting reviews, and people made comments and inferring that I had stole her character. Well, my character was totally different, because I had since then, when I found out what I had done, I kind of checked out her Joe Morelli, and it turned out his personality was like polar opposite of my Joe Morelli, totally different type of a person, even though they had the same career, very different people, and the same name. So it was about book 3 maybe when I found out what I had done wrong, and for a brief moment I thought maybe I need to change his name, but that really wasn't possible because that meant I'd have to redo all the books, and all the books had already gone out, and I had all the different vendors they were at, so I had to leave it stand. But unfortunately, I am not sure if I could have prevented that, because as you create character names, it's not realistic to Google every single one that you do. I mean, you just can't do it. Now, I might do that on book titles, but book titles, often there are multiple book titles with the same, or multiple books with the same title. That's pretty common. In fact, my book Sugar Rush there's a lot of Sugar Rushes out there. When I first put that book out there, there wasn't, I think maybe there was one or something that I found. Now there's quite a few of them. So that's pretty common in the book world to have titles, books the same title. And character names, it's the same situation. I have seen friends of mine that have written character names and been accused of the same thing I was accused of, like stealing some other author's character, when that wasn't really the case. There are millions of books out there with millions of characters, and it's impossible to not duplicate a character name. It will happen. So if I had it to do over, unfortunately, there's probably nothing I could have done to prevent it. Had I known about the other Joe Morelli, if I was more aware, had I read one of the books or paid more attention, then definitely I would have named my character something else. The next one has to do with I have a problem with typing the wrong character name. And sometimes I do this when I speak. I'll say the wrong person's name when I'm talking to somebody. And it's really a problem when you're writing, because you're writing along and all of a sudden you type, Alexandra's name and you mean to type Lily's name or some other name that maybe sounds similar, and you go along, and if you don't catch that, you hope the editor will catch it, and if the editor doesn't catch it, you hope a beta reader will catch it, and if one of the betas don't catch it, it keeps going down the line. And unfortunately, even if you have a dozen eyes on a book, a wrong name can slip through, and it has with my books before, and that is a real problem with me. So now I'm kind of in a situation where I am very hypersensitive to it, and I try really to look for that now, where I didn't in the very beginning because I didn't realize it was such a problem, but I do now. Colson's Wife, the first book in my Colson family saga under my Anna J. McIntyre name, there were a couple issues where the names were switched around in that book, and I had reviewers that said they liked the book, but what's with this, the wrong name, and they were really disappointed with that editing issue. Well, the problem was I kept reading the book, and I had a couple other people read the book, and we could not find where the problem was. We kept looking through it, and I tried doing searches, and I could not find where that mistake was. Finally, a reviewer was kind enough to leave a good review and happened to mention where exactly in the book that took place, and I was able to find it and make the correction, and I thanked him. But it's not a reviewer, it's not a reader's responsibility to correct a mistake of an author. I mean, definitely not. We have a product and we send it out, and we don't expect our consumer to fix our products for us. That's silly. But unfortunately, issues like that will happen. I know when I type, I very often will type the wrong word when I mean something else, and I know what I mean, but my fingers don't. So that is a problem, and you have to have a lot of eyes on it. And it's one reason I think it's important for everyone to have an editor. And even if you have an editor, there's no guarantee that something like that won't slip through, because I know it has with me. And I've had some of my books, edited maybe 3 or 4 times over the years. I'll want to make sure that there's still, maybe there's something we missed, and I'll send it through another editor. But still, things will slip through. So that was that mistake. Now, speaking of the wrong word typed, there was another instance that was extremely embarrassing for me. It happened, I believe, in my first book, and maybe even my second book. I can't remember, but I know it did happen in one of them. Now, I know the difference between mute and moot. I know the difference. I've always known the difference. I mean, for years, since I was in high school, I've known the difference between that. But like I said, my fingers don't always know the difference. So I use that word in my book several times, and every time I typed mute for moot. Not a good thing to do. Well, my editor did not catch it, and none of the beta readers caught it either. And it slipped through into publishing, and I was just kind of devastated because it made me look really stupid. I mean, it was a stupid, stupid mistake. And I went back and corrected the files, and I did kind of change my editors at that point. But, those things do happen. So that's one of the times I had my books re-edited, was after that. So those things do happen, and that's why it really is important to have another set of eyes. Even if you feel like you are an editor, or maybe you are an editor, there's a lot of writers out there that are also editors, you really need another proofreader to look at your work before you go to print, because you will skip things even if you know the right rules. The next one also has to do with the name. It has to do with my pen name, Anna J. McIntyre. When I first started out, I wanted to use a pen name because at that time I had a couple of nonfiction books out about Havasu palms, and I wanted to keep those separate from any of my McIntyre books. So I chose Anna J. McIntyre. Very simple reason. I took Anna because my middle name is Ann, so I figured, okay, I would go with Anna. J, my maiden name is Johnson, Anna J. And McIntyre, I'm really into genealogy, so I looked in my family tree, and one of my great-grandmother's last name was McIntyre, and so I chose Anna J. McIntyre. I then went into Amazon and I searched to see if there were any other authors named Anna J. McIntyre, Anna McIntyre, and I couldn't find anything, so I thought, yeah, I'm safe, so I used that. Well, what I should have done, I should have also Googled the name. That was really stupid of me. Because, as it turned out, there's an artist out there named Anna J. McIntyre. Her name is Anna. I believe her J is for Jane. McIntyre. If you want to check out her work and give her some business, that would be great. But I just feel guilty. But I had used it for a long time before I realized, and once again, this was one of those things I couldn't change, but I felt bad, like I stole her name or something, and that really was never the intention. And the names are all names from me. I mean, J for Johnson and Anna for my middle name and McIntyre for a great-grandmother. But still, I would never have selected that had I Googled it. So when you are selecting a pen name, don't just check Amazon to see if there is another author by that name. Make sure you Google it and that there's somebody out there that's well-known that needs their business name, and don't intrude on it. The next mistake I made had to do with when I launched my Haunting Danielle series. Now, if you're familiar with that series, you'll know that the covers each have the same house on it, and on each different cover there'll be different silhouettes in the various windows, and the backgrounds will be all different colors, and you might have decorations on a Christmas book, or maybe Christmas lights hanging on the house, or a 4th of July book might have fireworks in the background. Now, I have been very happy with that particular branding decision. When I first launched the series, I had the bright idea to just have a big Haunting Danielle on the very top of the cover and not to use a book title. Instead, I was going to go like book 1, book 2. I knew I was going to write a series of books, and I just thought that would be the easiest way to do it. It would be less confusing for readers. What a stupid idea. So around book 3 or 4, I realized that was really a stupid idea for different reasons. One thing, it really was more confusing for a reader because remembering numbers was a lot more difficult than seeing a book title. And because the covers were so similar with all the same house, it just made it more confusing. And another problem, the different vendors did not like that, having practically the same title for every book. It was just a stupid idea. So I ended up changing it, and at first when I made the change, I had the cover designer just swap out the book the numbers for the new titles. Now, what I did, I made a branding decision when I decided to use titles. Every book in the series starts with The Ghost, and then it goes on, like The Ghost of Marlowe House, The Ghost Who Loved Diamonds, The Ghost Who Wasn't, and so forth. And that's how I have the titles now. So when I made that change and got rid of, I still have book numbers. I mean, I still have a book number so a reader knows what, which book it is, but I have a book number and a title. So when I first made the change, I left the big Haunting Danielle because I like that branding idea. And in some ways, I think they did help brand the series early on. But it also made it really hard to read what the title was. In fact, I had one reviewer who left this review, cracked me up. She said she felt that I didn't want people to review her book, and that was why I had such a big Haunting Danielle and the title really small. I was trying to hide the title to make it more difficult, and that was really funny. I thought that was kind of hilarious because usually authors want their books reviewed, so I didn't respond to that reviewer, but I did kind of think it was funny. So I did eventually change, so now the books, as you'll see, they have the large title in front, and then the Haunting Danielle with the book number is on top. So I did make that change. So that was kind of a stupid thing, and so consider that when you brand your books. And if you're writing a series, it is important to have your titles go together in some way. And if you look at other books that are doing well in your genre, that are series, you'll see what other authors have done along those lines. My next mistake has to do with a book I wrote under my Anna J. McIntyre pen name, which is After Sundown. This is a book that I started over 30 years ago, and it was greatly influenced by the romance novels I read during that time frame. Back then, many of the male leads in the books were very sort of alpha males, and some of them could be a little jerky and domineering, and in today's standards would be very politically incorrect. So foolishly, I decided to rewrite that book, and because I liked the beginning of it, and I didn't change the character enough to appeal to readers of this generation. So my mom was one of my beta readers, and she's actually a pretty good beta reader, and she read the book, and she came into my office and she said, "I hate your character, he's just a jerk." So I thought, wow, okay, I'll tone him down a little bit. Well, I toned him down a little bit, made him a little less jerky, but unfortunately my readers didn't see that way, and I had some pretty bad reviews on that book. Now, if I go back and look at some reviews on books from some of the authors that influenced me, I kind of have to chuckle in some ways because some of their negative reviews are more current, similar along the tone that I was getting. So I was really writing for totally the wrong generation in that sense of romance readers. And I understand, in my mind, I knew he was kind of a jerk, but I felt he had some redeeming qualities. I felt that I had explained enough why he had this behavior, and towards the end of the book, I felt he was a better human being. But a lot of my readers really weren't tolerant of that character's growth or his attitude, and I don't think they liked how the female character in that book, how she maybe accepted some of his misbehavior, where she should have had a different, spoken up more. So for me, I think I wrote a romance novel for the total, I was outdated. That was really a mistake, and I think that really adversely affected the Unlocked Heart series, because that was the first book I wrote in the series, and when I got those reviews, I really did make a change in how I wrote the characters in the rest of the books. I kind of took that jerk quality out of most of them. They have to have a little jerky in them, but not like, they weren't like he was. But unfortunately, what happened is a lot of those readers that read that book first, then they didn't read the other books. So I do believe that really hurt the Unlocked Heart series. It didn't give the other books in the series a fair enough chance. They've done okay, but I think that has a lot to do with that first book. And I really should not, looking back, I shouldn't have published it. I should have just gone with the other ones that I did write with it, and I think that series would have had a better chance of doing better than it did. So writing and readers change over the years, and sometimes we have to realize that we need to change with the time or write something else. And that's really one reason that I genre hopped and went from romance over to the Cozy Mystery series, because I felt that I was better suited for that in this time in my life. Now the next one is an embarrassing mistake, but ironically no one else has ever pointed it out to me, so I don't know how many people caught it or just figured it was a typo and didn't make that big of a deal about it. But my main character in Lessons, which is now called Colson's Lessons, is Alexandra, which is a woman. And in the very first book, the very first word in the very first book is Alexandra. Well, when I typed it, I typed Alexander, the male version of the name. Well, I didn't catch it. And that book went through like 3 or 4 editors, and they never caught it. And beta readers never caught it. And I never saw a single review that mentioned that first name being incorrect, that it was Alex, but maybe when they started reading it, they weren't that attuned because it was the very first name in the book, so they didn't really know who they were reading about. And then later on, they realized it was a woman, and maybe they forgot about reading the wrong name first. I could see more for somebody that maybe reread the book, that they would have caught it. Now, my mom reread that book dozens of times, and she never caught it because that was one of her favorite books, and so she's read it over and over again, but she never caught it. And how it was caught is I did one day. I happened to pick it up to look at it, and I was like, it just jumped out on me. And I said, oh my God, nobody has ever caught it. I finally caught it. And what's really irritating is I have that book in a hardback, and the hardback is Alexander instead of Alexandra. So I went back and had to change all the files for the paperbacks and the ebooks and make the changes. But that I also there's a cardinal rule in self-publishing. There's 3 things to really increase your chances of a book doing better. And you really need to do these 3 things. One of them is you have to have a professional book cover that's appropriate for your genre. Now, it can be a beautiful book cover, but if it doesn't go with your genre, if it doesn't tell readers that are looking for your type of read what kind of book it is, then it's useless. It might as well just be an ugly cover. And it needs to be, like I say, a professional and appropriate for your genre. So that's the first cardinal rule. The second one is your blurb, your book description that the readers see. It has to be really something that draws them in, because the cover they'll see and they'll go, oh, that's a neat cover, let's see. And then they'll look and they'll read the blurb. So that's the second thing they look at, and that blurb has to draw them in. Now, the third thing is what a reader will normally do. First they look at the cover, then they read the blurb, and then they read what is inside, and they'll read a couple chapters that the different vendors let them see. So it's very important for those first chapters to be so perfectly polished and not a mistake. So if you re-edit anything in your book, always re-edit that first portion where readers are going to first dive in, because if they see it online, they're not going to buy it if they see a bunch of glaring typos and mistakes. And here I had the very first word in my first chapter, Alexander, instead of Alexander. That was really a dumb one. So remember that when you're proofing your books, to double check your preview part. My next publishing mistake has to do with not keeping a really comprehensive and up-to-date book Bible, which is really important for a series. Now, I have one, but it's not as up-to-date as it really should be. I have not been that faithful to it. It's my fault. However, I have been really careful in spite of that to double-check facts, because I really believe that we as writers have a responsibility, especially for our readers that are reading our series, our fans, that we are consistent, we don't screw up, we don't suddenly change, like for instance, somebody in this book has a male dog, and the next book that dog suddenly is a female dog. I mean, we need to keep all these little details straight as we go from one book to another, and readers will catch that, especially your really loyal fans. And it's kind of a slap in the face to them when you just kind of like throw things around and you're not really careful with them. So a book Bible will help you do that. Now, it's not like I don't have one. I do have one. I'm just not, I get so wrapped up with writing my book, I'll jot down a note and say, I'll put that down later, and I don't always. It's sort of like when you put something somewhere in your house and you think, I'll remember where this is, and then you don't remember where it is. So it's the same thing with the book Bible. So if you're going to, my suggestions for all the writers out there, before you start a series, make sure you have something in place to keep a really accurate and up-to-date book Bible, because down the road it will help you when you write each of your new books, and you won't disappoint your readers. The next one has to do with the program Scribner. Now, if you're not familiar with Scribner, it is a word processing program for writers. It has all kinds of capabilities. It stores documents. You can create a series Bible in there. You can track your characters, your events. You can, bring in documents, you can rearrange your chapters easier. It's all kinds of things you can do with it. Well, when I was first introduced to Scribner, I looked at it and I downloaded the free version that you can download for like a couple months to use. And I tried it out, and I was a Word person. I still use Word all the time. I've been using it for years, and I thought, now I don't really need to learn a new program. I can do what I need to do with Word. And so I sort of left it behind. Well, when I was quite a few books into Haunting Danielle, and like in my last segment when I was talking about how, the book Bible, you have to keep it updated. Well, mine was all over the place, and it was really hard to, find the information I needed, and it was just really a pain. So I went back to Scribner and I looked at what they had, and I realized that what they offered was much better than what I was doing on my own, and so I switched over to the program. Now, I regret that I didn't start the series with that program, because then I would have all the books on the files and it would be so much easier to find information I need, but I didn't do that. So if you're starting a series, look for a similar program. Maybe Scribner is the one for you, or another one. Something that you can keep track of your characters and that you can have your documents at hand. It is really convenient, and as a series grows, it becomes more cumbersome. And so that's something to think about before you get to that situation, because once it gets out of hand, you're never going to get total control of it again. So that is my advice on that one. And I have one more. The last one I'm going to mention today isn't so much an embarrassing mistake as much as it's something that I overlooked when I started my Haunting Danielle series. It's something I wish I would have done. And that involves Marlowe House, which is the house on the book covers, and it is a central character in the stories. Now, in my head, I know what the inside of the house looks like. I know where the rooms are, and I have since, drawn up a floor plan that, sort of works to show readers, where the different places are located in the house. But had I had it to do over, to make it more realistic, and it would have enriched the series if I could have some way found a house to use in the book and gone in and taken pictures and had, a floor plan drawn out, which is, would have been a difficult thing to do, but I would have loved the chance to do something. Another option would have been maybe to gone online and look for floor plans of Victorian houses. Now, that would have probably been more feasible if I had done something like that. So if you have something like a house or a location, you might want to have that drawn out before you start your series, which is something that a lot of fantasy authors do. You'll see the maps that shows, what their little world is like. So that's not that uncommon in, the fantasy genre to do that. So for me, I wish I would have done that with Marlowe House, but I didn't. So those are the mistakes that I'm sharing today. I know I've done other mistakes because I'm human and that's what we do. But I thought I'd share those. They're some of the more notable ones that I look back on and I kind of cringe sometimes, or wish I could have do-overs. But there are no do-overs. You can only move forward. Now, for the other writers out there, if you have any mistakes that you made along the way and you look back and you think, oh gosh, especially if they're mistakes that other writers can learn from, and like not moving the wrong files and Vellum, that type of thing, to prevent somebody else from doing what we did wrong, leave it in the comments. Help your fellow writers, get through this with not making the same mistakes that we've made. And, but also remember that we will make mistakes. And when you try anything and when you put yourself out there, you are going to have embarrassing moments. You're going to have reviews come in that say horrible things about you, but you'll have reviews that come in that say good things. At least hopefully you will. And so you have to put all that in perspective and just keep moving forward and know that, when you do make a mistake, learn from it, because that's what mistakes are all about. And the very best thing you can do with all these stupid things that you do, stick them away for story fodder and pull them out when you want to add a little humor to one of your future books. So for now, everybody stay safe and have a great week. And I hope this sheltered in place gets over quickly but safely. And until then, wash your hands and stay 6 feet away from everybody and stay healthy. Bye. Oh, and right on.